A song to those who are gone on this November 20th, 1992, a day that WFTL will look back with fondness on John Kennedy and ask the question, is Bill Clinton the new JFK to be? I know it was the 22nd of November that John F. Kennedy was slain because we had just got done celebrating Mom's birthday, which was on the 21st. And the family had just gotten a brand new color TV that weekend, sitting in the living room watching the ceremonies of a slain president. We were all, the family, heartbroken. And I, like everybody else, remember the place, the time, and the moments of learning about the assassination of the President of the United States. Like many people my age, just turning 40, 41, we remember well sitting in our schoolrooms, in our classroom. I was in algebra class, I believe. It was a 7th grade algebra. Mr. O'Neill was the teacher at Lawrence Junior High School in Cedarhurst, New York. Behind me was sitting a delinquent of a kid. His name was Glenn. Glenn was always getting into trouble, one way or another. And to my right was his friend Dennis Jakowski. Dennis would eventually get shot in Vietnam. But as the class was proceeding and Mr. O'Neill wearing his darkened suit covered with chalk, Mr. O'Neill always seemed to wear the same suit every day, I was tapped on the shoulder by Glenn. And he said, "Hey, man, the president's been shot." Glenn having just returned from one of his jaunts in the hallway. I said, "What are you talking about?" He says, "Man, you'll see, the president's been shot." And then moments later, while the period normally ended at 2:45 and we would go to our homeroom, the principal came on. Or was it the assistant principal, Herman Wild, the same man who taught driver's education? And he said, "I have some somber news to report." You remember back in high schools and junior high schools, we all had classrooms that had these big square boxes on the ceiling or near the ceiling from which announcements were made, in which we were informed of what our destinies would be, how our lives would be led. We would be like led on chains, you know what I mean? And Mr. Wild came on and said, "Students, I have some very somber news to report. President of the United States of America, John Fitzgerald Kennedy, was shot, assassinated, killed in Dallas, Texas, while riding in a motorcade. Classes," he announced, "were immediately suspended. There would be no homeroom. Pack up your books and go directly to your school bus." And many of us, very young, not fully understanding what had happened, did just what he said, only knowing that somehow, in some way, this was a momentous event in our lives that was going to change the course of history, that would affect our destiny, our future. And we muddled about quietly, grabbing our books, walking in a very somber school, off to the buses. And as we got on the buses, we heard rumors that a communist had shot JFK, that the governor of Texas had also been shot at the same time. And as the bus headed down Central Avenue and turned left on Branch Boulevard, I remember a couple of friends, like my good buddy Barry, mentioning, well, why couldn't they have killed the governor of Texas instead of the president of the United States? And none of us could really grasp the awesome impact of that shooting. None of us could ever attempt to assess then how it would ultimately affect us. But somehow, we knew that our very young, embryonic lives had been given a grown-up slap in the face. And what was to follow in the next 4 days, including the assassination of John F. Kennedy's killer, Lee Harvey Oswald, by a restaurant owner named Jack Ruby, on live TV as he was being escorted from a Texas police station into the court, was to astonish us even more. And we'd watch in disbelief again and again and again as some man with a black feathered cap came jumping out of a crowd and shot the man who shot JFK. And we would learn from the footage about the 6th floor depository, where the gun had been found, where the shots had been fired from. And of course, there was that occasional rumor that some people said, oh, no, we heard shots from the grassy knoll. And we remember the very, very somber moment when Jacqueline Kennedy jumped onto the rear of the car after JFK had been shot. And we would watch the footage of Jacqueline climbing on the rear of the car as the car started to speed away at 45, 50 miles an hour. And Jacqueline was crawling to her impending death to be hit by another car, but a Secret Service agent leaped up onto the trunk and pulled Jackie back in. The First Lady in shock and dismay over the death of her husband. And we remember the ceremonies. We remember the national and international leaders quietly walking up Constitution Avenue. De Gaulle comes to mind. In somber tribute to the fallen president who would lay in the rotunda. And we remember John and his salute. His quiet, dignified salute to his slain father, the President of the United States. And we remember the candle that was lit at Arlington. And we remember the eulogy that both Robert and Teddy were to give. And we still see President Johnson standing on Air Force One, being sworn in as President of the United States while flying back to Washington, D.C. And it all comes back to us like a haunting memory of a moment in time that would change our lives forever. Much in the way people a generation before remember the stark radio call of Franklin Delano Roosevelt when he got on national radio, and you stood beside that radio in those days and you looked right at it as if it were a 53-inch color TV set and listened as the President of the United States said, "Yesterday, a day that will live in infamy, saw the Japanese attack Pearl Harbor and kill many United States soldiers." Remember that day? You remember where you were then, don't you? It's etched into your memory. It's carved into your soul. It's notched into your belt. And you carry the weight and the baggage of that moment with you each and every hour of your lives. We are ultimately, as Adlai Stevenson said, passengers on the spaceship Earth. And our cruise makes certain ports. And certain ports will be forever our ports of call to the consciousness we all have. What was it Hermes said in the epigram to the great book, Summer of 42? Life is a series of comings and goings, and for everything we take with us, there is something we leave behind. For those of us between the ages of 37 and 45, that day in Dallas caused us to leave something behind. It was, as I said, the first sense of consciousness about being an adult. A consciousness that was to be awakened again and again through the turbulent 60s. from the war that went on day after day, to the senator from New York who was slain, to the black civil rights leader, to man landing on the moon, to Johnson saying on March 31st, 1968, I shall not seek and will not accept the nomination of my party to be President of the United States. To Mayor Daley saying shoot when you see the whites of their eyes, of the protesters in Chicago. To the days we marched in New Hampshire in the snow, clean for Gene. Those were times that Rick Seidemann says are laughable, but indeed they stirred the consciousness of a nation. Just as Barry Goldwater did for some when he said, extremism in the defense of liberty is no vice. But he was defeated in 1964 because America is ultimately a land of moderation. And what we saw happen in the 1960s was just a little bit too much for our consciousness to bear. So what I'd like you to stop and do and think about as we come back here in this show this morning, on this particular day, November 20th, 1963. I'd like you to stop and think for a moment, where were you? What were you doing on November 22nd, 1963?
Hot Talk, 24 hours a day on AM 14 WFTL.
Of course, you know, with the Kennedys, they probably have a birthday every other day in their family.
It's true.
I mean, every one of them had 10 daughters and sons, you know?
Yeah. I was 23 at the time working in a plant that built diesel generators in upstate New York.
What part of what upstate New York? Where?
Well, to me, it was upstate back then, Suffern.
Oh, well, that's Route 59.
Walt Weiss.
So, I'll tell you, see, Suffern, New York, Route 59, the beginning of the Catskills, is upstate New York to Long Islanders. But
exactly, that's why I always called it upstate.
To people from
Someone
Albany.
said to me, Albany, I mean, that was another state.
Right, Albany and Utica people say, how could you dare call the Catskills upstate?
Well, it was beautiful then, a little beautiful now. But in any event, I was working in this plant with in the office with a bunch of these macho men, all year long. And when we got the news, everybody just broke down and cried. It was a heavy day. Even speaking about it, I get choked up.
Mm-hmm. And what do you remember of that now, how it affected your life? Did it change your view of the world?
Well, for a while, it got me out of politics. Kennedy got me into politics. I was young then, 20, 22, and so forth. And all people my age who never paid attention to what was going on in the world finally started to because of Kennedy, the youthfulness and so forth. And for me personally, when it was all over, the funeral was over, the train, I would sit and watch for 10 hours a train just driving by, going through different towns. That's what I remember the most on the TV coverage. How I could just sit there and watch a train, but yet I couldn't turn my head away from it. But what it basically did for me was I just, all that enthusiasm for the world and politics, I just dropped out for a bunch of years.
Mm-hmm. Do you remember when Pete Rozelle said the NFL is going to go on and play games as scheduled?
Yeah, I briefly remember that. There was a lot of, to do about that, but I don't even remember what the outcome was. It was a time where everyone just forgot about everything else except that particular incident.
The world stopped in its tracks for
Exactly.
4 days.
Exactly.
And that's why the book on his assassination, the ultimate book, was entitled 4 Days.
Yeah. Thanks, Norm.
All right. Thanks for calling in. All right. Where were you on the moment, at the day, at the time, John F. Kennedy was shot?
Today, not a victory of party, but a celebration of freedom, symbolizing an end as well as a beginning. For man holds in his mortal hands the power to abolish all forms of human poverty and all forms of human life. And yet the same revolutionary beliefs
It's back to Storm and Norman in the morning on AM 14 WFTL.
Cold and wet and rainy as I pulled out to come to work this morning at about 5:45 a.m. Once again, I headed up 13th Avenue or 13th Street onto 9th Avenue in Fort Lauderdale to weave my way through the back roads into the radio station, and astoundingly, amazingly, incredibly, since between 4 and 8 a.m. is the time you are allowed to water your lawn under the law, I found dozens of apartment complexes, one condominium in particular, where the sprinkler system was going off. And what can I tell you? It's just amazing. Here you have a water shortage in South Florida. The Everglades, in case we don't know it, it's not that they're drying up, but the level of the Biscayne aquifer just is not where it should be. And yet there are people watering their lawns as it pours and rains outside. It doesn't make sense. What does make sense is if you have an irrigation system from Jet Care sprinkler systems. See, Jet Care, let's put it this way, where Jet goes, everything grows. They are one-stop shopping for your irrigation system, for your lawn, for maintenance, for your sprinklers, for your sprinkler heads, for those nipples that break off, for pests and pesticide control. Everything gets taken care of, and they install those little things that are mandated by law and certainly make sense economically. I mean, it's not just that they're environmentally prudent, they're economically unconscionable not to have. Rain sensors. Rain sensors, come on, folks, make my life better. Don't make me drive to work on a rainy morning and see people having their sprinkler systems going off. No, no, no. It's time to call Tony Frank. That's TonyFrank at 943-8093. Take down the number, 943-8093. Now, let me tell you, suppose you're just living in a condo right now, and you're paying maintenance charges. Suppose you're in one of those commercial office complexes where you have those CAM charges, the common area maintenance charges. But you come to work at 9 o'clock and you see that the parking lot has sprinklers on in the rain. Well, hey, get a hold of your building manager. Get a hold of the person who's running the condo complex and have him call Tony at Jet Care so he can put in the rain sensors that will stop you from paying increased maintenance charges because your stupid building manager's a jerk. All right? Have him do it today. Especially today because he can look outside and see his sprinklers going off while it's pouring. 943-8093. Give Tony a call today and save money tomorrow. Let's go to Dottie on line number 1. Good morning.
Hi, Norman. I was in Nashville, Tennessee at my deli when Kennedy was assassinated.
What kind of deli did you have?
I had a Jewish-American deli.
Uh-huh. Now, Nashville's a southern state. John Kennedy wasn't all that popular in the South, but what was the reaction in the deli and in your community?
It was bad. They really was sad. Very sad. And I was also in the same deli at the time that Reuben shot Oswald.
Right, a few days, and you were probably watching the TV.
That's right. We had a big TV.
And you were all watching it, and you were probably stunned and shocked when that happened.
That's right. And something else I want to tell you. I don't call you very often. I think I've called you about maybe twice, years back, 6 months ago. But I have a bottle of Dr. Pepper.
Yes.
Which is the 1972 Dolphin.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, I'd like to give you one.
Oh, I'd love it. Thank you.
I'll find a way because now, you know, you can't shake them up too much because it's still full. It's never been opened.
That's great.
And I'd like to get that to you, and I'll find a way.
All right, well, we're right here at WFTL. Where do you live, Dottie?
I live in Plantation.
Well, you know what? Just give Brian your number, and we'll have Brian the Aspiring call you and take care of it.
Well, how about sending it by Jimmy Ray?
What do you mean, send Jimmy Ray with it?
Can I send it by Jimmy Ray?
Oh, you mean you know Jimmy Ray?
Pardon me?
You know Jimmy Ray?
Yeah.
Oh, sure. Give it to Jimmy Ray to give to me.
Okay, I'll have him bring it over. Can he put it in your slot? Or?
Yeah, sure.
Because, they're worth money.
Yeah, and we'll save it and cherish it.
Okay, so
Okay.
I'll have Jimmy Ray to bring it over.
Okay. That'll be great.
And put it in your box.
All right, thanks a lot.
Okay, hon.
Bye-bye.
Nice day. Bye.
Let every nation know, whether it wishes us well or ill, that we shall pay any price, bear any burden, meet any hardship, support any friend, oppose any foe, to assure the survival and the success of liberty. This much we pledge and more. To those old allies whose cultural and spiritual origins we share, we pledge the loyalty of faithful friends. United, there is little we cannot do in a host of cooperative ventures. Divided, there is little we can do, for we dare not meet a powerful challenge at odds and split asunder.
Here during the first hour of the Storm and Norm Kent show on this JFK retrospective, his inaugural address delivered to the nation January 20th, 1961. Following his election to the presidency in one of the closest campaigns, indeed the closest campaign ever, in which he had defeated the Vice President of the United States, Richard Milhouse Nixon. The question, as William Clinton takes office next month, having defeated the Vice President of the United States and the President of the United States, George Bush, is whether or not Bill Clinton can become the new JFK. Today, a JFK retrospective, supposedly all day on FTL, with conspiracy theories abounding, in discussions with Al Rantel, Rick Seidemann, and even later on in the evening, Pat Stevens. I have been talking mostly early this morning and inviting you to call in and share with me that moment in time, that perspective in your universe, that little spectacle of our lives, about where we were when we found out on November 22nd, 1963, that the President of the United States had been slain while driving along in a Dallas motorcade by a lone gunman acting with a rifle from a Texas book depository. Where were you then? When we come back on FTL AM 1400.
Florida's talk leader.
Okay, it's 7 minutes after 7 a.m. here on a Friday morning. Yesterday from 6 to 7:30. The topic of discussion was the Sheriff of Broward County, Nick Navarro, and his awarding of a prison health services contract to a firm to cover the next 3 years when the current contract doesn't even expire until September 30th, 1993, 9 months after Nick Navarro's term did. Well, the Nickster, the Nickmeister, perhaps he heard our plea and our call and our passion here on FTL. He has announced as of 5 o'clock last night that he indeed will not award that contract to another party. The word injunction by Judge Leonard Fleet took hold, and Sheriff Navarro has agreed to follow the mandate of the law and honor that decision, threatening he was yesterday to appeal it, but today he has affirmed it. Not only that, are you ready for this? Here's a major announcement from my attorney, Rick Rosenbaum. In our public records request to get copies of all the records concerning the dispensation of funds from the not-for-profit corporation that Nick Navarro heads up with his wife and ex-deputy Ron Cacciatore concerning the Broward County gyms, our lawsuit does not have to go forward. Yesterday, I guess Nick, I'm telling you, he must have heard my plea. He is repenting everywhere. The good sheriff of Nottingham has decided to, and indeed has, turned over all public records to myself, the Miami Herald, and the Sun Sentinel concerning the allegations about funding these private entities. So the public records requests have been honored. Apparently, my attorneys are now going through the documents to make sure that all the books are in order and the foundation is indeed not denying the public trust, but is instead serving the public interest. So it is an encouraging morning from the sheriff's office. The sheriff has agreed, in case you're listening out there, who was that caller that I argued with this about for 20 minutes yesterday, telling him that I believe the sheriff had acted improperly? Well, apparently the sheriff has decided to let Ron Cochran make decisions about Ron Cochran's future and has agreed not to award any contracts in the remaining 35, 40 days of his term, and has further agreed to make available to the county officials, to the newspaper media and the radio media, public records of the private corporations he has set up. That indeed is encouraging. Let's turn to Marion as we continue with our show on FTL.
Hello, I have a prayer card given out, at funeral services of Kennedy. And it says the 35th President of the United States, born May 29, 1917, entered into eternal rest November 22nd, 1963. And I'll always cherish this. Has his picture on it.
Where were you when he was shot?
I was working for a surgeon in Jamaica, New York. And it was on a Friday, and I thought I'd go shopping, Christmas shopping. I went to Gert's department store.
Which is right there on Flushing Avenue.
No, Jamaica Avenue.
Jamaica Avenue in
Hillside.
In Hillside.
And I got up to the second floor in the escalator, and everyone was standing around the TVs. And that's how I found out about it. So I turned around and went back to the office. Christmas seemed very unimportant.
Well, save that card.
I sure will. Cherish
Okay.
it.
Thanks for calling.
You're welcome. Bye-bye.
Let's go to Carol on line 2.
Yeah, hi. You want to know what I did on the day Kennedy was assassinated? I was 6 years old. We were let out of school, and all the kids thought, wow, this is great. We can get to go to the candy store. Candy store was closed due to the assassination, and we picketed at the candy store for at least a couple of hours.
Well, a couple of people out there were kind of young. I know my listening audience, and a friend of mine just called up a little while ago, and he said he was only 5 years old and sitting by the TV. He was going to call up and say it on the air, but he said he was embarrassed because he had very little memories at the age of 5 years old.
Well, this stuck.
Of course, by the time he was 25, his mind was so smoke-filled he had no memories then either.
Well, this really stuck in my mind because he was so upset that Red's was closed. And also, my father had a party for the death of the pet president. He was so elated over it and his friends.
No, come on.
Yes, because...
No, now, don't tell me this. Don't tell me
I
that while all of America was in tears, your father threw a party celebrating his assassination.
Party with his friends because he did not like Robert and he did not like John because...
Well, now, what do you mean? You're 5 years old. What do you mean by a party?
A party to the effect that he was very happy over it. He thought it was good because then all the probing that his brother was doing into organized crime would stop.
Well, I guess your father was a criminal.
Well, what he is has nothing to do on me. All I know that I was upset because my candy store was closed that day.
Well, that's great. I'm glad to see you were so deeply concerned about the future of America.
Right.
Thank you very much, Karen.
All right.
Okay. I'm going to forget that call. I'm just going to write that one off, chalk it up to the immaturity of a very, very young girl denied her lollipop. Good morning.
Hi. I remember where I was the day JFK was assassinated. I was in the hospital, and I remember hearing a terrible scream. And the nurses and all running around, and none of the patients knew what had happened. And it was just unbelievable. And even to this day, I feel that the American people were robbed because maybe the country would have taken a different route. I don't know. All I know is that he was probably, in my estimation, he was one of the greatest. And we just don't know what would have happened. He never had the opportunity to complete a 4-year term. And there's a lot of people who are very skeptical about him now. But I don't look at it that way. I mean, we never had a president like that.
Do you think Bill Clinton can meet the aspirations of people who believe that the torch had been passed to a new generation with JFK?
Yes, because I saw that in Clinton. When I saw something that was so real about the man and who cared about the people the way John F. Kennedy did. And this is just what I see. And you're talking about JFK, am I correct?
Yes.
But he was just loved by everyone, even his people who didn't like him in terms politically. You couldn't help but like him. His press conferences, where when the press conferences got dull, he used to call on Miss May Craig, and she was sure to liven them up.
All right, that's a good point.
I mean, he was just somebody to be admired and to be respected.
Well, thank you so much for your call.
You're welcome.
Let both sides explore what problems unite us, instead of belaboring those problems which divide us. Let both sides, for the first time, formulate serious and precise proposals for the inspection and control of arms, and bring the absolute power to destroy other nations under the absolute control of all nations.
We talk to you, AM 14, WFTL. With Storm and Norman on Florida's talk leader, WFTL.
She was the only really good-looking teacher I ever had. She'd been a freedom rider and used to stand in front of the room and tell us stories about being a freedom rider. She was very, very involved politically. And when Miss Rose, the principal, came over the PA system and announced that the president had been shot, everybody in my little second-grade classroom, when she said, the president has been shot, you're going to go home now, go home carefully, there will be no school on Monday, the classroom erupted. Everybody was thrilled to have a Monday off. And for the first time ever, never before and never after that, Miss Block got so angry and lectured us and just let us really feel her anger to the point that we were all really, really ashamed. And I went home and watched TV for 3 days like everybody else in America, I guess, and didn't really understand what had happened. All I knew was that I had done something that had displeased my second-grade teacher, who had always been an icon to me.
And what about that Carol who said she went to the candy store and...
I was in my car when I heard that, and that just annoyed me to death.
It annoyed you, but you probably went through the same experience with the other students in second and third grade.
For 30 seconds. Until Mrs. Block said, you should be ashamed of yourself. And then I don't think any of us actually grasped the depth of what had happened, but we understood that Mrs. Block, this person that we all cared about very much, was that upset that it should have been something that we should have been upset about.
See, at the age, and how old were you then? 5 or 6, right?
7.
See, at 5 years older, at the age of 12, the wake-up call was one where the person next to me, the young man named, if you were listening since 6, the young man named Glenn and Dennis, the two students who sat next to me, who told me about it before it came over the PA, they kind of laughed and chuckled and thought it was funny because they said, hey, we're going to get out of school. The president's been shot. That's what they whispered into my ear. And you look at him, disbelief. You don't make that kind of joke, right? And then, of course, the principal came on the PA system. And when we left the school, it was very, very somber. There were a few people that were making lighthearted remarks about how we were getting out of school a little bit early. And I remember one person said, we should have been shot at 9:30. We went there to take that math test or something. But overall, there was a sense at the age of 12 and 13 years old, as most of my friends were, and the guys who rode back on bus 53 to Woodmere with us, there was a sense that something of import and importance had happened, that the that a major event had gripped the United States, that we were enthralled in history?
Well, I will tell you, to this day, I can visualize. I can close my eyes and I can see that classroom. I can see what positions all our seats were in, how we've been instructed to turn all our seats. For whatever reason, they told us to turn all of our chairs towards the loudspeaker, which was at the right side of the classroom, all the way up towards the top of the top of the wall. And they told us, I mean, as if you couldn't hear if your seat was turned the other way, but they told us everybody should face it. And I can visualize that perfectly, and I can see Mrs. Block's face perfectly, having gone from, everything was fine, to the corners of her mouth going down, to the extreme anger that she gave us. And I don't think she was really angry at us, because we were 7 years old. We were in the second grade. We didn't know anything at that point. But I think she was just so angry at the world at that moment, and she took it out on our inappropriateness.
Like I said, a moment and a speck of time that will be indelibly marked into your consciousness.
Yes.
All right, thanks for your call.
You're welcome.
All right, let's go to Peggy on line 2 as we look back to November 22nd, 1963, and ask ourselves in 1992 where we were then.
Well, I was in my car waiting to go on a boat to pass a certain area going into Rhode Island, and we intended to go to Hyannisport, coincidentally, and the line was moving so slowly till finally it came to a dead stop when we heard this on the cars.
Well, if you were in Rhode Island on your way to Hyannisport on that ferry, I'm sure that the shock and dismay in that area of the country was as great as anywhere else.
And tell you what, when we went into Hyannisport, it was a dead city. A dead city, just plain dead. Nothing was moving. And I said to my husband, I want to go home. He said, what are you, out of your mind? He said, this is my only vacation this year. He says, and I'm going to go home. He said, no, you're staying here. And I felt so sad, so very sad. But I also want to talk to you about Bill Clinton. Last night I couldn't sleep, so I was watching TV and I saw some of the news. I want to tell you something, Norm. I felt that Kennedy, a clone of Kennedy is in Bill Clinton. Bill Clinton is definitely a clone of Kennedy. People, I don't know where he was going from place to place. People were grabbing onto him and shaking his hand, old and young. I said, this is a Kennedy. His ambition has got to be like a Kennedy. His wanting to do what he wants.
His spirit, his energy, his zeal, his youthfulness, his flashing smile, his willingness to step out in the crowd, his ability to inspire the old and the young, the poor and the rich is something that is very, very telling. And that's why John Kennedy was able to so successfully make his inaugural address and say that the torch has indeed been passed to a new generation. And I feel that way about Bill Clinton and Al Gore being only a year or two younger than each of them. And I got to tell you this, my brother Richard the Elder, as I like to say, at the Bob Dylan concert, sitting back with Janice and Jessica the child, looked at me and said, Norm, you know, I didn't realize how old I had become until it kicked into me that I was now older than the President of the United States of America. And two of us brothers looked at each other, remembering each other from the days we'd wrestle in the sandbox in Wurtsboro, New York at the Catskill Mountains Bungalow Colony, to sitting in the concert at Sunrise Musical Theater to watch Bob Dylan in 1992. And we laughed, we chuckled. Here I was with my older brother, my father having passed away for now 5-6 years, and he said, I'm now older than the President of the United States of America. Wow, that was a wake-up call to me.
You know something, when you start talking about J.F. Kennedy this morning, it brought to my mind while I was sitting and watching the news last night, and I said, this man has got to make good because he wants to make good.
Well, I think it's something that we'll all look forward to.
I think so, too. Have a good day, Norm.
All right, Peggy. Boy, I'll tell you, can you imagine what it would be like for some guy who works in the State Department near the White House to have gone into a McDonald's for lunch yesterday and have the President of the United States come up to you and start talking to you? Imagine this guy, he goes home to his wife. This goes, Bill Clinton stopped in the McDonald's right opposite the White House yesterday and started shaking hands and talking to people. Now, you'll know he's happy and confident about the presidency if he does that 200 days into his term, or 2 years into his term. I remember the friend I had who used to follow the Clinton campaign. When things were going well, he'd walk into the back of the press plane and shake hands and talk to everybody. But when it got rocky, when the questions about the draft were, driving him nuts, where he needed some time and space, he'd hide out in front of the plane and never go back and talk to the press. But can you imagine what it was like for this guy's wife? The man comes home from a day of work, worked in the State Department in some office building, or he worked at the Smithsonian or wherever, and the wife comes up to him and says, "Hi, honey, have a nice day?" Yeah, I had a nice day. I worked. I stopped at McDonald's, had lunch with the President of the United States, went back to work, and now I'm home. Can you imagine the wife slapping him? "Now don't you lie to me like that! You had lunch with the President of the United States. Who you kidding?" Well, that's probably what it was like. Some guy probably went home to his wife and said, "Honey, you're not going to believe this, but the President of the United States of America stopped over and asked me how I liked my McDonald's burger. He told me I could have it my way." All right. Well, that reminds me of another joke. A guy comes home last week to his wife, and he says, Honey, pack your bags. I've won the lottery. I've got $6 million, honey. I've won the lottery. Pack your bags right now." And she says, "Oh, my God, where are we going? Rome, Italy, London, Paris, tell me." Guy turns to her and says, "I don't care where you're going. Just be out of here within an hour." All right, it's 7:30 a.m. We'll be right back.
Florida's talk leader, AM 14, WFTL, and more with Storm and Norman Kent.
Jose Lean to Kansas City. Goodbye, Terry Shumpert, for a bunch of prospects. How about George Steinbrenner, the boss? He's about to come back to the helmsmanship of the New York Yankees and empower General Manager Gene Michael to spend buku bucks on guys like Greg Maddux and Barry Bonds. And, boy, I would like to see whose head is going to roll. Tom Verducci of Newsday says that Steinbrenner is livid that Charlie Hayes was left unprotected in the Major League Draft. The Yankees have been looking for a third baseman for a number of years, ever since realizing that Mike Pagliarulo could not handle the position. And basically, Hayes was the Yankees' best third baseman since Greg Nettles. And I don't know, I guess they'll have to try Bam Bam, who can hit but he can't field. 24 minutes to 8 a.m. on this November 20th, 1992, a day we have given perspective and history to the John F. Kennedy assassination, which occurred 29 years ago this Sunday. We've had people call in simply trying to reflect and look back at the days that were and what they were doing then. Our next caller is Bob. We've also been playing his inaugural address, if you've been listening since 6 a.m. You're on FTL, 733-1400 in Broward, 733-1400 in Broward, star 385 on your Bell South mobility line.
Bringing back all kinds of memories, Norm. But the memory that struck me was something happened about 10 years ago.
Well, of course, it has nothing to do with my show, but why not share it with me?
Norm, yes. Don't get wild. I was at this party in New York. Yeah, there were a lot of fairly well-known people there, and I was there 10 years ago, and I looked across the room, and who's there? Jacqueline Kennedy. So I've always wanted to meet her, and I was trying to think of something to break the ice. I walked up to her, and I said, Jacqueline, can you remember where you were November 22nd, 1963? For some reason she got upset and walked away.
What kind of asshole are you? What kind of real asshole are you? Would you do that? Are you as big a schmuck as you're making yourself out to be? You're telling me you went up to the former First Lady of the United States and asked her where she was on the day her husband was assassinated?
Really?
You know, it's always great to know that there are really assholes and schmucks like you out there making a fool of themselves, calling in on a regular basis, because people like you give me a newfound credibility when I reach for this button and hang up on you. What a jerk. What a total jerk.
Let both sides seek to invoke the wonders of science instead of its terrors. Together, let us explore the stars, conquer the deserts, eradicate disease, tap the ocean depths, and encourage the arts and commerce. Let both sides unite to heed in all corners of the earth the command of Isaiah to undo the heavy burdens and let the oppressed go free. and, if a beachhead of cooperation, may push back the jungle of suspicion, let both sides join in creating a new endeavor, not a new balance of power, but a new world of law, where the strong are just and the weak secure and the peace preserved. All this will not be finished in the first 100 days, nor will it be finished in the first 1,000 days, nor in the life of this administration, nor even perhaps in our lifetime on this planet. But let us begin.
On a cold day in January 1961, John F. Kennedy implored the nation to let us begin, to let every nation know that we would bear any burden, support any friend, fight any foe, endure any hardship to assure the survival and success of liberty here and around the world. That we would work to get away from the jungle of suspicion and go towards a beachhead of cooperation. And 29 years ago this Sunday, that voice was silenced in Dallas. Let's go to Paul. Where were you then?
Okay, I was 9 years old and obviously in class. The school principal came into our classroom and whispered something to the teacher, and I saw my teacher blanch, and then the two of them left the room. I sat in the back, and there was a door with a window. I saw every teacher on our floor gathered in a circle, and they're all like, "Oh my God, da, 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 da." We can't hear what they're saying, but we could see they're all upset. So I turned to this girl next to me. Her name was Debbie. I'll never forget this. And I said, "The way they're acting, you would think the president had been shot."
Oh.
And then the teacher comes back in and tells us, and she looks at me like I'm a monster, right? This girl, because, I had said it. And 10 years later, I ran into her, and she said, "You always scared me." And that's the story.
I always scared you because of that one moment.
Because of that one moment. Because for some reason, I knew instinctively something was, dreadfully wrong.
And I know that sitting in the algebra class that I was sitting in at Lawrence Junior High School, I always bitterly resented Dennis Joukowsky, who came to me and whispered in my ear, kind of laughingly, that the president had been shot. And this was only like a minute before the announcement came over the PA, but I remember being very angry at how cavalierly he had said it.
How he brought the news to you.
And how disbelieving I was. He had been out in the hallway or something, and...
Yeah. Well, what else could it possibly have been that they were all gathered there, so I just deduced it somehow. Then, for the Cuban Missile Crisis, prior to that, I was, a tutor to another child in the room because I was somewhat advanced, and he was slower. So I didn't understand it because I was only about 7, and so I was getting the news from my parents and television, and I was kind of like distorting it all. But apparently the way I heard it was that if Russia didn't take their missiles out immediately, it was going to be like nuclear war. So I told this kid, at 10:30 today, if something doesn't happen to get those missiles out, there's going to be bombs dropping everywhere. And at 25 after 10, the poor kid threw up all over the desk.
Oh, boy.
Yeah.
A little bit of John Belushi in you.
Yeah, I guess.
All right.
17
minutes before 8. Thank you for sharing your thoughts. And those of you who are just calling in or just waking up or just tuning in, what we have been doing since about 6:05 a.m., aside from playing the inaugural address of John Fitzgerald Kennedy to the nation on January 20th, 1961, without Robert Frost's poem, is we have been asking you to call in and share with us your thoughts on where you were 29 years ago this Sunday when John F. Kennedy was slain in a motorcade in Dallas. It is a moment, I think, as I have said repeatedly, that is indelibly etched into our consciousness, and most remarkable for me because I have had a lot of people that are in their 30s calling in, many of you who were only in 3rd and 4th grade, some even in 2nd grade when you were 5 and 6 years old. You're actually still so impacted by this momentous event in American history that you remember where you were back then. Maybe if you stop and think, it is one of the few moments of consciousness you have from those days when you were 5 and 6 years old. How many other days do you really remember from then? Well, this is one that as I said, has carved a niche in our souls that has opened up the valves to our heart as we remember those days which began with the bullets ringing out from the Texas depository, the President of the United States falling forward and then backward in his car, the First Lady crawling onto the trunk to be saved by a Secret Serviceman, the people in shock, in disbelief, as someone said, the bullets were fired from the grassy knoll, the bullets were fired from the building, the bullets were fired, the President of the United States had been shot. The governor of the state of Texas in the same car with the President in the motorcade also shot. And then the assassin, Lee Harvey Oswald, picked up and apprehended a day later by the Texas police, shot and slain himself as he was being moved from a Texas jail into a more secure prison, and a restaurant owner with a black hat, a fedora, as they like to be called, and they were worn often and regularly by men until John F. Kennedy showed up at his inaugural without one. Fedoras were the mark and tradition of the Susquehanna Hat Company, those of you that remember Lou Costello and Bud Abbott and that great routine about the Susquehanna Hat Company. Well, Jack Ruby showed up with his fedora and a gun and shot down Lee Harvey Oswald. And we remember these moments. We remember the quiet casket and the black horse going up and down Constitution Avenue. We remember people like Charles de Gaulle and other world leaders walking up behind the slain president and the days in the rotunda. And we remember, too, Lyndon Baines Johnson taking the oath of office in the plane with Jackie Kennedy by his side. And perhaps of all the events that are etched into our consciousness forever and ever, from those of us who were 10 years old to those of us who are 40, we remember all too well the man who is now a district attorney in New York City, the man who has been on the cover of Vogue magazine and considered one of the 10 handsomest men in America, John Fitzgerald Kennedy Jr., who we knew then as John John. We remember him almost in a little boy's dress, if you will, in a winter coat just a couple of feet as tall as he. We remember him quietly saluting his father, the slain President of the United States of America. We remember it all, some of us, as if it were yesterday. But it was not. It was 29 years ago, this Sunday. It is 7:45 on WFTL, 1400 AM, a somber morning here on the Norm Kent Show. We'll be right back.
Talk to us. We talk to you. WFTL. Now back to Storm and Norman on Florida's talk leader, AM 14 WFTL.
Okay, it's 10 minutes to 8. The lines are lit. Let's take some of the calls. We'll start with Chip on line 1.
Yeah, Norm, how you doing? I normally don't listen to talk radio, but I caught your show a couple mornings getting off of work, and I really enjoy your show.
Well, thank you.
And when he got shot, I was about 3 weeks from being born.
3 weeks from being born, eh?
Yeah, I was born December 13th. Happened to be a Friday.
So, obviously, the episode and event couldn't have impacted too much on your life, but as you grew up, how did it come to you to learn? In other words, how did you learn about it? How has it affected your life now?
Well, I have a lot of books on him, and I like him as a person and as a president. I think things would have been differently if he'd have been, around the whole time. I think he probably would have got, the whole 8 years. And I just think things like the Vietnam War probably would have been over quicker. If we'd have went in at all, he'd have probably just, went in and not worried about anybody else.
Certainly, it is interesting to get a perspective from somebody who wasn't born at the time he was assassinated. It lends a whole new dimension to it, because to those of us who were alive, he was an icon, a hero, somebody we looked up to, somebody who was a great leader. And as I go back and I do these things, I keep in mind that the average age of my audience is, I'd say, starts at the age of 35.
Wow.
And then again, I have kids like my nephew, who's 16, that listens on his way to school. So
yeah.
And I know Barbara, our bookkeeper, takes her 8-year-old daughter or something to school, and she listens.
Yeah. I love your show. I mean, I don't go to bed until 9 o'clock now. I used to go home.
Well, where do you work? You work as a security guard somewhere?
Yeah, right now I work security until I hopefully maybe get hired at Broward County Corrections.
Okay, well, get that application in.
It's in there.
We've got a new sheriff.
2 weeks. I know. I'm waiting. I'm dying.
All right, we're going to certainly, I'm sure he'll be screening applications and looking for qualified people.
Well, I'm dual certified, so hopefully.
Oh, well, that dual certification will help you, right?
I'm hoping.
A lot of the detention deputies got screwed because they were told for a number of years that if they go in at the detention level, they'll be given an opportunity to cross-train and become deputies. So people went in there, but they got locked in and boxed into only one opportunity. Hopefully that under the new sheriff, not only will the deputies get the raises they haven't gotten for a number of years, but those who are dual certified will get numerous opportunities to move up from detention to deputy in road patrol.
Also, wasn't his head, didn't he go back before he went forward?
Oh, yeah, I might have said that wrong, right? You see, you bookies, you're going to like today because 2 to 5 Al Rantel, are all the different conspiracy theories true? And then...
I believe they are.
Well, I'm just telling you what we have scheduled here today.
Okay.
Nick Lawrence, our producer, has kind of made it a JFK day.
Mm-hmm.
At 6 o'clock, Rick Seidemann is going to ask the question, would Lee Harvey Oswald have been convicted? No, says Walter Brown.
I don't think so.
And then at midnight, Pat will be asking who really shot from the grassy knoll.
That's probably what I'll be at a kid because I work 2 jobs. I work a part-time job too, so I won't be able to listen all day. Like I said, I'll go to sleep probably at 9 o'clock, and then I have to go to my part-time job 6 to 10. Then I work 11 to 7 at my full-time job right now. So I'll probably turn on the talk radio at your station at probably midnight or so.
All right. Well, you'll be hearing Pat talk about it again.
Okay.
All right. Thanks for calling.
Thank you, Norm.
Let's go to Betty on line 2.
Yeah.
That opens up a line, Betty, at 733-1400. And star FTL, star 385.
I know what the number is. I want to tell you
Well,
also
I have a good friend of mine who I trust dearly who
Aw.
told me that I don't give out the numbers enough.
Aw.
So I made a point today to give out the numbers more often.
Uh-huh. Well, I'm also from Long Island, but what I wanted to talk about was I was watching JFK's funeral, and when the main part of the ceremonies were over, Charles de Gaulle, who was president of France, had come over from France for the funeral. I've always been an admirer of his, and he started walking towards Johnson to commiserate and also probably to congratulate him on his presidency. And Johnson, that oaf, saw him coming and turned on his heel and turned his back on de Gaulle and walked away. And that was the beginning of a bad association between France and America. And it was Johnson who started that, and I saw it happen. Because you just didn't do that to John de Gaulle.
General Charles de Gaulle, I think you mean.
Charles de Gaulle, right.
All right, well, that's an interesting perspective. Thank you so much.
Welcome. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
In your hands, my fellow citizens, more than mine, will rest the final success or failure of our course. Since this country was founded, each generation of Americans has been summoned to give testimony to its national loyalty. The graves of young Americans who answered the call to service surround the globe. Now the trumpet summons us again, not as a call to bear arms, though arms we need, not as a call to battle, though in battle we are, but a call to bear the burden of a long twilight struggle, year in and year out, rejoicing in hope, patient in tribulation, a struggle against the common enemies of man, tyranny, poverty, disease, and war itself. Can we forge against these enemies a grand and global alliance, north and south, east and west, that can assure a more fruitful life for all mankind? Will you join in that historic effort?
a historic effort and a request for the American people to ask not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country. Those are the words and memorable words we are about to come on to as we continue with the inaugural presidential address of John Fitzgerald Kennedy, slain 29 years ago this weekend. 3 minutes to 8 a.m. Let's go to line 1. Good morning.
Good morning. I
Yes.
remember that I was 19 years old when President Kennedy was assassinated. And like so many people have said, he was the one who got me involved in politics. And for me, it's always...
Started the Peace Corps.
Pardon?
He started the Peace Corps, got people like George Platt involved in politics, too.
That's right. And for me, the day that he was assassinated was, I know it's a cliche, but it's like the end of Camelot and the end of innocence. After that, we got the Johnsons and the Nixons of the world, people who were, very mediocre compared to that excellence that Kennedy had made us all feel that
people who would not inspire us to excellence, but would ask us to be acceptable for expedience.
Right. I mean, there was.
That's it. Not people that would make us accept expedience as a rule.
Right. I mean, there was missing from the White House, from that leadership role, that elegance, that excellence, that striving for excellence, that feeling around the country that we could be all that we could be. And I think for a lot of people that age, who were about to embark upon their adulthood, it just kind of signaled really the end of innocence, and that just dropping back into that road of mediocrity. And for the first time, when I saw Bill Clinton, it just seemed to me that it was very reminiscent of JFK, and perhaps, once again.
And, like JFK, he had to endure a lot to get that nomination. He had to overcome many, many odds and incredible obstacles. And he did it without a very wealthy family behind him.
Right. I mean, and the way he would end every speech with, I still believe in a place called hope. And, to think that he did it with no contacts, no connections, no money, just pulled himself up and, went to Oxford, went to Yale. And, I just see now that same hope, that same possibility for excellence and that commitment to make everybody, not just them, but, make every one of us strive to be the best that we can be and to strive for excellence. And, perhaps there is a chance again.
I sense in his voice that very same spirit. I sense in his heart that sense of compassion. I sense in his energy that same zeal, and I hope and pray that we will survive the nattering nabobs of negativism that often pluck the airwaves here with their poison. That, of course, the 9 a.m. and 5 p.m. host, that who I have in mind. But keep up the energy, the optimism, and I think we'll all reach that Camelot one day again.
Okay, thank you, Norm.
It's 8 a.m. We'll be right back on FTL.
The news on WFTL Fort Lauderdale, brought to you by Barron's, with 16 convenient locations from West Palm to Dadeland.
Is Bill Clinton the new JFK? Does he offer you the hope, the inspiration, the promise, the zeal, the energy, and the optimism of the man who gave us Camelot? Is he the person that's going to bring back this country from the national malaise that Jimmy Carter once said we endured to the penetrating truths of a new tomorrow, to a 21st century, to a dream, to a vision? Here were some of the words the president spoke on January 20th, 1961.
In the long history of the world, only a few generations have been granted the role of defending freedom in its hour of maximum danger. I do not shrink from this responsibility. I welcome it. I do not believe that any of us would exchange places with any other people or any other generation. The energy, the faith, the devotion which we bring to this endeavor will light our country and all who serve it. And the glow from that fire can truly light the world. And so, my fellow Americans, Ask not what your country can do for you. Ask what you can do for your country.
Words that are as stirring on November 20th, 1992, as they were on January 20th, 1961. Let's go to DJ on line 1. This is Norm Kent. Good morning.
Norm, good morning. How you doing?
Okay.
Norm, you know, the date of November 22nd, 1981 is very significant. You know, people say, well, how can you do something like that on the anniversary of the death of the president? Well, that's when I got married. So
well, there you go. This
Sunday is 11 years for Lori and I.
Well,
so I don't think I'll ever forget.
Sorry. Maybe you can also remember this as the anniversary of the death of Superman, for all I know. By the way, that comic book is really terrible. Rich, if you're working and you see Gary today at noon, tell him one of the most pathetic comics I have ever seen is that plastic-wrapped Superman comic where Doomsday and he get into a Ruddock Bowe Xander Holyfield battle. It was like no Thriller in Manila, and Doomsday takes out Superman, but with a little black armband in there. Who are they kidding? Come on, what a dumb comic.
So did I remind you of Superman or my wedding?
Your wedding reminds me of Doomsday. What can I tell you?
Okay, it's a comic. Okay, I got you.
It's kind of like a Hollywood marriage, a great way to spend a weekend.
Well, anyway, I was also a third grader, and, you know, the typical story that people have been phoning in, you know, teacher coming in.
Well, you know, it's wet and rainy and morbid outside, so why not be morose all day?
You always
there's the kid in the background.
Yeah, they're on their way to school. Anyway, there's a parade out here in Plantation tomorrow. It's the holiday parade and starts at 10 o'clock, so if anybody's heading west on Broward Boulevard in the morning, forget it, because they're going to be detouring you.
Okay, we'll keep that in mind. I was heading west last night for the Beaujolais Festival over at the Grapevine Gourmet Shop.
And how was that?
And it was just absolutely outstanding. Last year it was number 7, but this year it's number 6 for the finest of all the Beaujolais wines. Norm says 6.
Also, we'll be looking for you Sunday at the Jazz Festival up there at the
Bread of Life. Great natural brunch jazz. Not only do they have this brunch with all natural foods, but they have an all-day jazz festival this Sunday that I was talking about to benefit the American Red Cross and victims of Hurricane Andrew. And in a couple of weeks, to benefit the Edward O'Bara Fund, they're going to have a great card show at Joe Robbie Stadium. So we'll be promoting all these great events that they have for the holidays, which help people out, including I'm sure BSO will be doing its annual Thanksgiving homeless meal thing.
How about the Bailiff's Ball? Is that coming up?
Well, I try to avoid that, okay?
All right, see you.
All right, thank you, DJ. Let's do Mark on line 5.
Hello, this is Mark.
Yes, that's why I said let's do Mark on line 5.
Yes, I was 19 years old, and I was in the U.S. Navy in Long Beach, California.
Well, should be a pretty interesting anecdote. Where were you stationed? Long Beach, California. You just told me that, idiot.
I was attached to a mine squadron. I was on a mine layer there, an LCU. And most of the people I was around were young adults in the military, naturally. And our big question at the time, of course we were shocked like everyone else, was what kind of person was Lyndon Johnson? Because obviously we worked for the president, and he was the new president, and we were apprehensive about what was in store for us and who Johnson was. And as the years went by, and I thought, like, you know, exactly like you did, that Kennedy was a great guy. And as years went by, people started asking me, well, I know what Kennedy said, and he said some great things, but what did Kennedy do that, you know, would make us think that he was such a great hero?
What Kennedy did was best articulated by that female caller. I believe her name was Carol or Peggy, right before 8 o'clock. What he did was lift us up. What he did was inspire us. What he did was make us feel good about ourselves, make us believe there was no mission that couldn't be accomplished, from feeding the homeless to helping the poor, without hurting ourselves. You see, one of the things that I don't like about shut 'em up and shock 'em radio that some of the other hosts here practice is, if you believe the philosophies of the guy that does 9 a.m., you would think that feeding the homeless means that we're all going to starve. But John F. Kennedy said it well in his inaugural when he said, if we cannot help the many who are poor, we cannot save the few who are rich. What John F. Kennedy did was give us the inspiration and vision to believe that we could reach the moon, the belief and faith that we could make everybody work, that we could live on a beachhead of cooperation instead of with a jungle of suspicion, that we could have a military that was at peace and a country that was at harmony. So regardless of the fact that all those things were not accomplished, and right there in his inaugural, if you've been listening this whole time, he said they won't be accomplished within the first 100 days, within the first 1,000 days. Some of these things, he said, won't even be accomplished within the lifetime of our planet. But we can set a course, chart a path, and work towards a positive vision of what the future can be. And in that sense, what the answer to your question is, John F. Kennedy appealed to the best in us.
And then Kennedy had the philosophy, and do you believe that Lyndon Johnson then tried to execute this philosophy, implement it?
I think that Lyndon Johnson's vision of a great society was an expansion of Kennedy's concept, but he could not capture the hearts and imagination and soul of the American people because he got bogged down in the quagmire of Vietnam, and it would eventually undermine his presidency because the headline with Walter Cronkite each day was not about a new project that Lyndon Baines Johnson and Lady Bird were starting. It was about how many soldiers would lose their lives in the jungles of Bien Phu.
Yes, well,
that's what I think.
Put that. I've never heard it quite that way before. What Kennedy actually did, he set a positive philosophy.
That's exactly right.
And even though the man didn't really do any real thing, he did try to set us on a correct path.
There you go.
And Johnson tried to execute it and implement it, but was not totally successful. And we are all hoping that maybe Clinton can bring us back and implement what perhaps Kennedy's philosophy was in a more correct manner.
Good analysis. Thanks for your call.
Thank you.
All right, it's about 8:16 a.m. Time for me to tell you about Merchandise Liquidators. If you're going to an affair or event this weekend, if you're taking part in some major function, why rent a tuxedo when you can own one for $99.99? That's right. $99.99, a brand new tuxedo. Some of you think when you go to Merchandise Liquidators you're renting it, and people bring it back after they've worn it. No way. And what about double-breasted tuxes, wool blend from $149.99? Pierre Cardin shirts, $13.99. I've seen them priced from. And other formal wear shirts for $14.99. Not only that, they have great bathing suits there at low prices. I saw bathrobes. I saw my favorite, Eddie Bauer sweaters. Now, you've got to know that in this kind of rotten weather, there's nothing quite like an Eddie Bauer sweater to make you feel better. And the prices are so low. And not only that, this weekend at Merchandise Liquidators, they're going to have a special stress testing thing for you to do your walking on. You know what I mean. Whatever that big schlamigget is that they use. What is it called? Computerized muscle testing, flexibility and range of motion test. DJ, if you're listening, a postural and spinal examination. It's all free tomorrow, Saturday, November 21st, from 9:30 a.m. to 12:30 p.m. These special tests for local area athletes. All right. Stop by Merchandise Liquidators. They are at 250 North Federal Highway in Hallandale on US 1, of course, and their number is 454-1657. Also this weekend, aside from Merchandise Liquidators menswear, is my good friend Richie Gerber at the Bread of Life with a great jazz festival, and we're going to take that spot right now. Richie Gerber, fill us in. Richie Gerber? Fill us in.
Hello, Norm. How you doing?
Okay.
We are having the Jam for Bread. And what it is with the help of the American Red Cross, we are putting on a jazz concert throughout the entire day of Sunday from 12 to 9 at night in our shopping center here at the Bread of Life on Federal Highway.
Capital Bank Plaza,
Capital Bank Plaza. We're going to have the biggest names in jazz, including...
Well, why don't you let me tell them where it is again?
Okay.
2388 North Federal Highway in Fort Lauderdale between Sunrise and Oakland Park Boulevard. Not too far from the new Norm Kent Sports Art Gallery. Not open yet, so don't go there. Go Sunday to 2388 North Federal, the Capital Bank Plaza, between 12 and 9 p.m. Richie, tell me a couple of the outstanding musicians you have performing aside from Ira Sullivan.
Ira Sullivan and Pete Minger, Eddie Higgins. We're having the greats down here. Another thing, it's going to the Christmas Fund for kids from victims of Hurricane Andrew. So all the money or donations of toys will be going right to help make a happy holiday season for the kids. And that's what we're doing. It's called the Jam for Bread, and it's sponsored by us at the Bread of Life. We have a lot of jazz happening throughout the weekend, too, in our restaurant. So, including Eddie Higgins on Saturday night from 7 to 10. And he'll be playing all of those old standards with Meredith D'Ambrosio. They're great teams. He has a wonderful voice.
All right, Richie. Well, thank you for calling, and I will be promoting it again, as I've been doing for the last hour, for the rest of this hour.
Do you think you'll be able to come down and do a little emceeing there for a little while?
For Sunday, absolutely. You can count on it.
Okay, we'll see you, and we'll put you up to the mic and see what you do.
All right. Well,
okay.
I don't do the guitar, but get me a little harmonica, and I'll do my version of Bob Dylan playing It Ain't Me, Babe.
Okay, babe.
All right. 20 minutes after 8 from Richie Gerber at the Bread of Life. We'll be back in a second.
Hot Talk, 24 hours a day on AM 14 WFTL. It's back to Storm and Norman in the morning on AM 14 WFTL.
My fellow citizens of the world, ask not what America will do for you, but what together we can do for the freedom of man.
Again, the stirring words of John Fitzgerald Kennedy, January 20th, 1961, here at FTL, what executive producer Nick Lawrence has deemed JFK Theme Day. And the different conspiracies concerning his death will be discussed by Al Rantel at 2 o'clock. Rick Seidemann at 6 will ask whether Lee Harvey Oswald would have been convicted. And at midnight, Pat Stevens will find out who really shot from the grassy knoll. And what can I tell you? That's what they have planned here. Let's go to our next caller. All the lines are lit, but Stan, you were the next.
Yes, good morning.
How you doing?
How are you? I had been listening to too much. I went out to play a little golf, and the guards were not happy with us today. So I came back and I was listening to the show, and I think you hit the nail on the head. What he brought to the presidency was a fresh breath of air, and I'm hoping that Mr. Clinton will be the same fresh breath of air, because it's pretty smelly in Washington.
Well, I think that you can expect that Bill Clinton will bring a new spirit, energy, and zeal and passion to the White House, and as long as he doesn't become hostage to the 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue structure and stays in touch with the people and hears their voice, and here's the key. The key is one quote that, there are so many great quotes in that inaugural address, but none is better than the one that suggests or intimates we're all in this together. Just like Bill Clinton says, we need all of us. That's why he doesn't want gays excluded from the military, women excluded from roles in political office. This country needs too much help, and all of us has too much to contribute so as to exclude any of us. There's a principle that I have articulated and shared in my own public speaking over the course of 2 decades as an activist, and it is very simply that the essence of America is its diversity, that we come together as a society not to exclude anyone but to include everyone, that we are as elastic as a rubber band and we can withstand the pressures as long as we all stay within one structure working together. And
You're absolutely right. Did you by any chance catch Hillary Clinton's speech the other night?
No, I wish I did. I hope I can see it on C-SPAN.
Children, the handicapped children?
I hope I can see it on C-SPAN because, like myself, she's been involved in the Children's Defense Fund. She was the national director.
She was, number one, she was wonderful. Number two, unfortunately, we judge people by their physical appearances. So she's done something with her hair or whatever, and she looked absolutely smashing. She was attractive. She was vibrant. She was clever. She was bright. She was witty. I didn't see her look at her notes once. She was absolutely... You want something? She's a beautiful, beautiful speaker. Just beautiful. I was very, very impressed. In spite of the fact that some of the hosts on FTL kicked the heck out of her. She's a heck of a lady.
Well, listen, just remember, you can't pull somebody down without reaching up, all right?
Yeah, well,
And just because there are hosts here that are jealous of a woman who has more on the ball than they do, that's no reason to knock.
That's for sure. And you know, some of your FTL hosts, unfortunately, always cry bigotry, 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 are in themselves the biggest.
Well, they know a cookie when they can taste it. Okay.
Yes, they certainly can. And I remember when Kennedy died. My oldest daughter, was 8 years old, and she came home from school, and she was absolutely hysterical. We had a very tough time controlling and calming her down because the children, they saw this couple as contemporaries nearly of themselves, or as a parent figure. And they associated themselves with these people, and it was a wonderful time in our history of the United States. And unfortunately, he didn't have the longevity that we would have liked. Another term, I think, would have proved them great.
Stan, how old are you now? About 50?
Me?
Yeah.
I'm 67.
67. Okay.
Yeah. But I mean, we went to the cemetery to Arlington, and we went to the Eternal Flame where he lies. And my daughter was prostrate. She just practically lay on the ground. They must have thought she was related in some way, because the children at 8, 9, and 10 just thought of these people as their older brother or their older sister, and they knew enough.
Okay, thank you.
Full time. And I think we're going to see it again with Clinton and Hillary.
Thank you for your call.
Thank you very much.
All right, Alfred.
Good morning. For the past 3 days, Steve Kane and Al Rantel and also Rick Seidemann have been talking about this mass exodus, from...
And for the past 2.5 hours, I have not been. Let's go to Bob on line 3.
Norman, good morning.
Good morning.
Let me tell you, Kennedy inspired the people. He gave them hope when he spoke. And at that time, we needed that. Like a good coach of a football team. He inspires the men to go out and do a good job. And that's what he did. And then Ron Cochran, I'm glad that Sheriff Navarro backed down, and you did it. Yesterday you talk about Navarro and Cochran. He backed down. He isn't giving us any trouble anymore.
Well, I'm delighted.
Back out like a nice gentleman.
I'm delighted to see that Sheriff Navarro has, in fact, turned over the public records of the youth gymnasiums to my attorney pursuant to my public records law demand. I'm delighted he's turned over the public records concerning the Prison Health Services contract to the Miami Herald and Sun Sentinel. I'm delighted that Sheriff Navarro has recognized his term is up, that he has a life to lead, that he has new passions to follow, and he should not be awarding a 3-year contract to a new prison health services firm when the current contract doesn't expire until September of 1993, when he's finally recognized that the appropriate thing to do is turn that task over to the sheriff-elect, Ron Cochran. So,
and Ron Cochran is going to do a good job.
Not that I'm going to offer kudos to the sheriff for this turn and change of heart, but I think it was said ever so eloquently in its arrogance when Sam Price, his counsel, said yesterday, the sheriff is not responsible to the public. We can do whatever the hell we want to do. Well, that very attitude is what got him booted out of office.
Well, you're terrific, Norman. Thanks a million.
All right. Well, Bob,
good servant to the city of Sunrise and for the Broward County.
All right, Bob. All right. Take
care, Norm.
Take a chill, Bob. Okay. All right, 8:30 a.m. here on WFTL. What's frightening is I actually met the man once. He showed up on election night. 8:30 a.m. here on WFTL 1400 on JFK Retrospective Day, Friday, November 20th, 1992.
Hot Talk 24 hours a day, AM 14, WFTL. More with Storm and Norman on Florida's talk leader, WFTL.
Okay, let me give you a news bulletin out of Windsor Castle in London, not far from the Heathrow Airport. Apparently, a major fire has broken out in the castle where the Duke of York, Prince Andrew, has been staying. The Duke of York has apparently successfully avoided the flames and is in safety now. The fire is still burning. It is somewhere near midday in London, and Windsor Castle is in flames. This is a 800-year-old institution, first built, as I recall, back in the 11th century by William the Conqueror, and it currently houses, as I remember from my 1975 visit to London, some of the most exquisite art pieces in this world, on this planet, including originals by Rembrandt and Rubens, and hopefully some of the other talk show hosts here during the day will fill you in on it. Rich is giving me some information on gossip about Prince Charles, but that's all right. We do have an update now, and apparently at least Prince Andrew, the Duke of York, has successfully fled Windsor Castle, but this 800-year-old structure is in flames. Apparently the fire started in the back part of the castle, and given the age and antiquity of the structure, it might be quite a while before the firemen are able to put out all the flames. Luckily, because they are so close to Heathrow Airport, I would suspect that a lot of the firefighting equipment at the airport can be diverted to Windsor Castle. As I said, it was built almost 800 years ago and houses some of the greatest art exhibits in the history of this planet. 25 minutes to 9 a.m. We're talking about JFK. Let's go to Frank on line 1.
Norman?
Yes.
This has nothing to do with JFK. I spoke with you last night, and yesterday I did you, your station, and Dolores King a great disservice by accusing you of what I did running off at the mouth. And I also demanded a public apology of you, and I was wrong. So what I want to do is publicly apologize to you and your station.
Oh, well, Frank, if you're worried about that little thing about Eileen Lieberman, she's a great person. Don't worry about it.
Thank you. Just wanted you to know I was in error.
Okay, no problem.
All right.
I'll tell Dolores you said that.
Please do.
All right. Maybe King Paul will give me that new car after all.
Maybe you'll give me one also.
All right.
Thank you.
All right. Looks like Mom's got herself a new Spirit. She's gone from the Aries to the 600 SE to a new Spirit. We'll find out later today. 23 minutes to 9 a.m. here on FTL. Let's go to Jack on line 5.
Norman, good morning.
Good morning.
You're at the top of your game today. Congratulations. You're doing a very good job.
Thank you.
I mean that seriously. I think the essence of the answer to that fellow's question before is very simple as far as what did JFK do? What did he actually do? And the essence of the answer is in the challenge that he gave us to ask not what you can do not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country. And the irony of that, of course, is in your cohorts, or not your cohorts, your fellow talk show hosts, when they were talking about George Bush and saying, well, what can he do? How can you expect him to do anything? What he can do is to inspire and to lead and to motivate and to be presidential.
Well, I think what Al Rantel repeatedly said during the campaign needs further testimony here today. Al Rantel pointed out ever so frequently that Bill Clinton talked about us. He did not talk about you and they. The very concept of programming that Steve Kane has tried to generate here, and he's done it quite successfully, is a you and they concept, is a we and us versus you and them, I versus you. It's confrontational. What Bill Clinton has asked is that we confront together the problems of our country and work together at a resolution, and we don't look to divide gay people against fundamentalists, black people against white, women against men. We're looking on how this country can function as a cohesive, fluid machine, and towards that sense, he tries to bring out the best in us. He's not divisive. He's not getting up there and saying, if you don't believe in family values, you're not a patriot. He's not getting up there and saying, if you don't have a wife and kids, you're not an American. He is saying that we all have something to contribute, that we all count,
And
that
the
we
diversity
all matter.
You hit the nail right on the head. That is the essence of the greatness of this country, is that there are so many people with so many different things to give from different perspectives that we have to put it all together. We can't split it apart or we will fall apart.
Hey, look, we're all specialists. No matter what we do, we fulfill a function. You know, you take apart a ship and put the bow in the water, it will sink. Put the stern in the water, it will sink. Put the mast in the water, it will sink. But put it together in one cohesive structure, and you suddenly have a fighting machine or sailing machine that can go around the globe. And it's that way. You can take a baseball team, and you could have a shortstop who is a defensive specialist, but he alone cannot win the game unless you have a guy who can hit the ball with power, unless you have a catcher who can pick up the ball in the dirt, unless you have a second baseman that can move to his right. So, you see, everybody fulfills a role, and together a group of specialists form a cohesive whole. And even in the radio station, it would not be enough if you just had 7 or 8 liberal, articulate voices for progressive policies and had nobody like Rick, who is appropriately regressive, who still believes in discrimination. We need people like Steve, who went through wife swapping yesterday and are into monogamy today, who admitted to being an alcoholic once but today says he's sober. We need these people who have matured and come to reasonable dreams about what things should be like.
Somebody mentioned Hillary.
What the hell did I just say? Went over my head too, Richard. I was making it up as I went along, because when you're talking to Jack, you got to be entertaining, because you damn well know he ain't.
Oh, nice guy. Thanks a lot.
All right. Sure, I thought I'd share that with you. Jack, I don't want to scare you, but when you called, there were 5 lines lit, and now none are. So let me give out the numbers again. 733-1400 in Broward, 1-800-874-3454 in Dade and Palm Beach, and star 385 on your Bell South utility line. Are you there?
I'm here.
You want to continue?
Yeah. Did you go
Please
to the
don't.
Dylan concert last week?
Dylan concert, yes. It was at the Dylan concert. See, you haven't been listening since 6 a.m.
Oh.
It was at the Dylan concert where Richard the Elder, my older brother, turned to me, and this man who I grew up with as a boy turned to me with his Janice by his side and little Jessica, who's about 6 months old and had earplugs in her ear, watching the concert because I guess he wanted to expose her to Dylan real early in life. And he said, it's a sobering thought, Norm, but I've just realized that I'm now older than the President of the United States.
It was a great concert, wasn't it?
All right.
He was fantastic.
It ain't me, babe.
It ain't me either.
Okay.
Okay, have a great day.
Let's go. But he didn't play like a Rolling Stone. He didn't play Blowing in the Wind. And he didn't play God is on Our Side. If God is on our side, said Bob Dylan, then there won't be any other wars, okay? 18 minutes to 9 a.m. Let's go to Richie on line 1.
Hi, Norm.
Yes.
I'm going to make it quick. Last night I was watching CNBC, and Al Kunstler, an attorney, was being interviewed.
Yes, I know, Mr.
Catch
Kunstler.
that?
What?
Did you happen to catch that?
No, I did not see it, but I know Mr. Kunstler.
He made a statement that one of the best things, I can't paraphrase him, but one of the best things that ever happened to this country was the death of JFK and his brother.
Well, how did he mean that? I mean, did he mean that in the sense that he was glad they were shot, or did he mean that in the sense that it awoke America up and created a higher sense of consciousness for America? I mean, I'd have to know the whole context in which the remark was addressed. Obviously, standing on its face, it sounds like an outrageously callous remark, perfectly typical of Mr. Kunstler.
Okay. All right. I'm not sure how he meant, but I took it to mean that they didn't do any good for this country.
Well, I don't agree with Mr. Kunstler, and I didn't always agree with the things he's done over the years, but I don't know how he said it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, he's been a good trial lawyer, I can tell you that.
Yeah, I guess. I'm sorry, I can't tell you exactly how he...
So you just thought you'd kind of, poison the context of my show by creating an air of suspicion where one shouldn't exist.
Well, not really.
All right, Richie, we forgive you.
Okay.
Call again.
Take care.
Maybe you can do more of this sometime.
All right.
All right? So where were you, by the way? How old are you?
How old am I?
Yeah.
I'm 46.
So where were you when Kennedy was shot?
I was shining shoes in Paterson, New Jersey.
Shining shoes, eh?
I was a shoe shiner.
And now you've got your own mobile phone in South Florida.
America's great.
I'm telling you. All right, don't forget to pay that bill at the end of the month.
Don't worry about it.
All right. Southern Bell says it's reporting losses of $50 million this year. I always ask that question. How do these companies that lose $169 million a quarter pay their bills? What kind of credit do they have? I mean, I'm 20 days late or $50 late on my car payment, and, you know, I have Chrysler Credit calling me up every 3 hours on the half hour wanting to know where the hell I am with it, right? But these companies, they report losses of $169 million to make page 3A of the newspaper. That's why America's great, okay? Let's go to Mildred on line 2. Good morning.
Good morning, first-time caller, and I think you should be in government. You're an inspiration. I've been listening to you from 6 to 9 every single morning, and today I could not resist the temptation of calling you.
Well, I'm glad you got up the courage to call.
Oh, it wasn't courage. I felt you had so many callers.
Just remember, ask not what you can do for your radio show, ask what your radio show can do for you.
You're doing a lot. You're doing an awful lot. You're giving everybody inspiration, and today's program just topped it all.
All right, thanks a lot.
Yeah, you're welcome. I thank you.
Flattery will get you everywhere.
I thank you.
Just send a check, okay?
Okay, darling.
All right, bye.
Finally, whether you are citizens of America or citizens of the world, ask of us here the same high standard of strength and sacrifice which we ask of you. With a good conscience, our only sure reward, with history the final judge of our deeds, let us go forth to lead the land we love, asking His blessing and His help, but knowing that here on earth, God's work must truly be our own.
AM 14 WFTL and more with Stormin' Norman Kent.
Well, a big weekend is planned, what with the Bread of Life Jazz Festival Sunday at Capital Bank Plaza, 2388 North Federal, from noon to 9 p.m., and I'll have to get out that harmonica. And, of course, Saturday night, one of Steve's sponsors, La Traviata, will be hosting a dinner party for Mom on her birthday, and the whole family will be there, so that is going to be rewarding. And last night was an especially rewarding night because I had the opportunity to go to the, 19th or 18th annual Beaujolais Bash, or 9th annual. I don't know. I just got lost in the sea of wines at the Grapevine, the Great Grapevine, a gourmet shop located at 256 South University Drive. Boy, at 7 o'clock last night at the Grapevine opposite the Broward Mall, there was a line of people to get in to test the great new Beaujolais that have now arrived in South Florida and will make great gift giving for your holiday plans. And don't forget the gift baskets that were so eloquently and distinguishedly wrapped. I'm making up my own words, but that's the only thing you can do when you look at a gift basket from the Grapevine with those gorgeous, gorgeous cookies that are homemade and the salmon pastas and the sourdough bread that I took home. Now, you won't find all these items in a gift basket, but a gift basket is something you can give to somebody for a holiday gift, or you can plan it for somebody who's in a hospital recovering from an illness, or you can just send one over here at FTL because we entertain you so much. At the Grapevine, gift baskets are just one of the many things you can do for the holiday, as well as give some of the fine wines that they now offer as a result of their Beaujolais Bash. And what a great time they had. Even their kids came back from all over the country to partake in this festival. So, Paul and Carol, congratulations on a great party, and congratulations to you, each and every one of you individually, for selecting the Grapevine as your gourmet shop in which to select fine wines, great gourmet foods, delicious hot entrees every day, a fine selection of coffees that would make Alexa Gente proud, and certainly a place that's become an institution and part of the community in Plantation. Give them a call at 475-1357, 475-1357, and find out what they can just do for you over there at the Grapevine. Let's go to line 1 on this JFK day with Murray.
Morning, Norman. First, I was reminded of JFK because I was stuck in traffic on the Long Island Expressway when the shooting occurred and made a U-turn practically to get home to find out what had happened. However, the other reminder I had was that there's a parallel with today in terms of the fact that today we remember JFK nostalgically, but at that time he was the subject of a lot of vituperation similar to the stuff that we've been getting on Bill Clinton.
That's because he had the guts and courage to make waves. But internationally, when he went to Berlin, he was greeted by thousands and thousands of people as a spokesman for freedom. When he went to Paris, he said, "You remember me, I'm the man who accompanied Jackie to Paris." Remember when Jackie was so adulated that when he went to a foreign country, he would introduce Jackie first?
Oh, yeah, no, I do remember all of that, and I remember how most of the people, or two-thirds of the people, felt about him, but there was always that hateful third that looks for things like they did in this last campaign.
Well, there are people, and some of them broadcast here at the station, who are spiteful, hateful, who don't know the opportunity to be good anymore, who have let, hate kills the hater.
I know
and maybe that's what the people who rely on the tabloids for their radio shows need to be reminded of. Since they obviously don't pay their debts, those of them who made bets on the election don't want to honor those debts, maybe they need to be reminded simply that hate kills the hater, and they ought to look at America in a much more loving and compassionate way and understand that just because the homeless are fed doesn't mean that they will starve. Just because that the jobless are employed doesn't mean they will be put out of work. Just because that gays get a job in the military doesn't mean that we won't have as good a fighting force. The same old paraphernalia that was thrown out when women were going to become members of the military is being thrown out now that gays are becoming members of the military.
Oh, I remember very clearly the feeling I had that politics was going to a higher, newer level when Kennedy was elected. And it took an assassin's bullet, took several assassin's bullets in terms of Bobby and Martin Luther King to change things around to the point where America looked at things selfishly and elected someone like Reagan and followed with George Bush.
Well, an assassin's bullet...
We will turn back to the way it was.
Understand that an assassin's bullet are the bullets of a false revenge. And while the friendless world had lost itself a friend with the death of John Kennedy, no assassin's bullet will ever stop the power and event. And, the country that is America, and Reagan seemed to capture this pretty well in some of his talks, it's a process, not a destination. It's a growing, evolving journey. And even those that try to shut down, it's happened before. Delano Roosevelt was shot at, and President Lincoln was shot, and Kennedy was shot, and certainly Ronald Reagan was shot at and shot. But you see, you can't stop a force and power and nation as great as America, because ultimately we are a collection of individuals working towards a common goal, even though there are people that want us to be divided and apart.
I think, too, there's a lesson for Mr. Kane and all of this in that nobody remembers, or very few remember, the reasons given by the haters against John Kennedy, and no one will remember Steve Kane and Ricks and Ronald Reagan and George Bush's attempts to divide us. And what will be remembered is Kennedy's uplifting way of trying to unite us instead, so that maybe Mr. Kane ought to rethink his divisive policies and get to something a little more constructive.
Well, why don't you call that and suggest that to him?
God, the same solemn oath our forebears prescribed nearly a century and 3/4 ago. The world is very different now, for man holds in his mortal hands the power to abolish all forms of human poverty and all forms of human life. And yet the same revolutionary beliefs for which our forebears fought are still at issue around the globe. The belief that the rights of man come not from the generosity of the state, but from the hand of God. We dare not forget today that we are the heirs of that first revolution. Let the word go forth from this time and place to friend and foe alike that the torch has been passed to a new generation of Americans born in this century, tempered by war, disciplined by a hard and bitter peace, proud of our ancient heritage, and unwilling to witness or permit the slow undoing. The world is very different now, for man holds in his mortal hands the power to abolish all forms of human poverty.
Kind of bumped into the CD there while I was playing that part of the JFK inaugural tape. It is November 20th, 1992, a wet and weary Friday morning. Another day of rain that South Florida really may not need this time. Boy, after a couple of torrid days, Wednesday and Thursday, we're soaked again here today, or Tuesday and Wednesday, we're soaked again here on Friday. Nick Lawrence, our executive producer, he asked that we do a theme today on FTL, a JFK theme, and yet I see nothing so scheduled for Steve or Gary, so don't ask me to explain that. But at 2 o'clock, Al Rantel will ask the question of the conspiracy theories